This is Rich Nelson with Allendale with a special video discussing our issues with this 26th annual nationwide producer survey here. Now, we've done this for 26 separate years, as mentioned here, and this is a nationwide producer survey, not a crop tour. We're going to discuss a few issues with the survey itself and also discover a little more ideas as far as what could happen with production from this point on out. Now, as far as our nationwide producer survey, we actually feel a nationwide survey itself is maybe a little better way of doing things rather than a crop tour. And the primary issue here, number one, is going to be geographic coverage here within a state. Here's the state of Iowa itself with all the various counties laid out, as well as USDA's 9 separate districts that they use in their own model as far as their own special yield survey that they do with producers. And keep in mind, for this September report up ahead, USDA does 2 separate surveys. Number one is a producer survey. In fact, that makes the bulk of all of their data that they get is a nationwide producer survey. And we've modeled our numbers in our survey exactly as they're going to do it here, asking farmers directly what their numbers are. The second portion of their data is going to be the objective in-field yield checks, and those are actually a smaller portion of the total data collection. So we certainly feel that the way we do our survey, modeled after USDA with the farmer-based estimates here, is probably going to be a better way of doing things. Now, as far as geographic coverage I mentioned, let's take a look at Allendale's coverage for this survey for the number one state in the nation, Iowa. As you can see here, we have quite a good distribution, geographic distribution of surveys taken here. And in this case, we've got just over 60% of all counties covered for the state of Iowa. One of the hindrances with crop tours is you're only covering limited sections of each state. Now, if you have normal weather, that's actually not too much of a problem. The issue does come when you have a divided weather system throughout, for instance, spring and summer. You may see some of those changes. A good example is the state of Illinois, which actually has 3 separate climate zones from north, central, and south. And we feel lucky with a producer survey to have coverage in each of those separate climate zones, which you may not be able to get in a specific crop tour. Now, as far as the numbers themselves, actually a little larger than you would expect as far as corn, 167.1 bushels an acre, giving a 13.548 billion bushel crop. That's the second largest yield number and the second largest production number in history for the corn crop. And it's actually not too far from USDA's August report suggesting a 168.8 bushel per acre yield. And they were using at that time 13.686 billion bushels for production. As far as soybeans, the numbers would probably fit more into the trade's general expectation, 45.4 bushels an acre and a 3.791 billion bushel production. Just like corn, this will also be the second largest yield and the second largest production in history as well. Now, we also do offer a few different things with this survey as far as a few different questions. Number one is going to be as far as the frost-free dates. In other words, when is the crop mature enough to where it will not be harmed by frost? In this case, for the most part, late September to early October captured most of the responses. I will point out Michigan does stand out a little bit here. A few producers up in Michigan, in fact, many of them suggested some late planting issues would impact their frost-free dates. I would consider that more of an anomaly here compared with the rest of the Corn Belt, though. For the most part, it looks to be like late September, early October will capture any problems with frost here. Now, as far as the yield breakdowns by state here, the states of Iowa, Nebraska, and Minnesota all had numbers suggesting higher yields than USDA's August survey. And most of the eastern Corn Belt states, as well as South Dakota and a few of these others, North Dakota as well, and Missouri, all suggested lower than USDA's August numbers. So as a whole, keep in mind USDA's August survey is more or less a partial survey. They're actually not able to do in-field checks on most of the crop itself. They have to plug in more or less a standard. In this case, actually for this year, they used a little higher than average ear weight measurement here. Producers basically told us in this case, yes, USDA's ear weight measurement may have been just a little large, but for the most part, for the nation as a whole, this is really not going to be that devastating of a crop here at all. So 167.1 on corn, 45.4 on soybeans. And as I mentioned, as far as corn goes, this would be certainly a large crop to speak of, 13.5 billion bushels, and the same thing for soybeans in terms of large size as well. What we will point out regarding our recent history, and as we said, as far as this industry goes, you're only as good as your last number or your last trade in this case here. Looks like in terms of recent history, the numbers are still very, very strong compared with USDA's September report. Last year, for instance, we were only 0.2 bushels an acre off for corn and 0.2 bushels per acre off for soybeans. Now, as you would expect with this report, and this survey was done in the last 2 weeks of August, the numbers are actually very, very strong as far as corn goes, an R squared here of 0.998. And as far as soybeans, very strong as well, though as you would expect, since this is a still developing crop, not as accurate as the corn here. So in terms of main issues, we certainly feel that that a nationwide producer survey gives some very, very strong results. And for those of us who want to see a visual here, looks like regarding the corn numbers, the only one which really sticks out here would be that 2012 estimate here. And of course, that would be a very, very tough estimate to make, as that would be a more or less a 25-year crop drought problem here. Now, as far as soybeans, as I mentioned, the numbers do widen out just a little bit here, which is expected for any soybean estimate at this time of year. As a whole, though, we mentioned that R squared being very, very strong here at 0.965. So as a whole, the numbers for corn a little larger than expected here. A few selected Western Corn Belt states suggested actually a little higher yields than the August numbers from USDA. Regarding the numbers for soybeans, still very, very strong. However, probably more in line with what most of the trade is looking at right now. If you have any questions about these numbers and market impact, feel free to give Allendale a call here, 1-800-262-7538.